Is this a divinely ordained herald of significant transformation? In 2005, a chasm 60 kilometers long spontaneously formed in Ethiopia, giving rise to a nascent ocean. Occasionally, the very ground we stand on reminds us of its less than steadfast nature. Interestingly, it featured formations resembling doves. For many, its illumination and timing seem significant. For centuries, the Mount of Olives has remained an immutable sentinel, an ancient watchtower surveying Jerusalem, awaiting the scripturally predicted global upheaval. Now, that moment might be unfolding in plain sight. In the serene pre-dawn hours, witnesses felt the earth shudder, observed fissures propagating across the holy mountain, and beheld a mysterious luminosity emanating from the ground, as if responding to a divine decree. Prophecy, geological activity, and first-hand accounts are converging in a manner demanding our utmost attention. Is the Mount of Olives commencing its promised division exactly as prophesied by Zechariah? If so, what follows? Are we prepared for it? Before we delve deeper, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to ensure you never miss our next prophetic update. Let us now explore the events unfolding on the Mount of Olives. At 4:14 a.m., as Jerusalem rested in its deepest slumber, a disturbance stirred beneath the ancient stones. A phenomenon too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be disregarded. The Mount of Olives, typically a steadfast guardian over the sleeping city, released a tremor so subtle that no seismic instrument registered it. Yet, thousands perceived it. Pilgrims paused mid-step. Worshippers froze, prayer books half open. Early morning laborers on the narrow pathways described the ground shifting with the exactitude of a hushed command. No roar, no rumble, merely a single ripple propagating from east to west, as if adhering to a preordained script. Surveillance cameras positioned along the ridge captured an impossible sight. Hairline fractures materializing in real time, elongating along the eastern slope, precisely in the direction Zechariah delineated 2 millennia ago. Footage showed the cracks widening by mere millimeters, too insignificant to induce panic, yet sufficient to unnerve anyone conversant with prophecy. Israel's Geological Survey subsequently reported nothing unusual. No pressure accumulation, no subterranean movement. According to their sensors, the mountain slept. According to witnesses, it breathed. Those standing closest experienced more than just a vibration. They sensed a change in the atmosphere, a tightening, as if the mountain had inhaled, one man whispered. Another depicted a weight descending upon the hillside, not oppressive, but authoritative, akin to being in the presence of someone who had awaited centuries to speak. And then came the stillness. A woman walking near the Garden of Gethsemane reported her feet becoming inexplicably rooted to the ground. A tour guide near the overlook felt his pulse quicken as the earth seemed to hum beneath him. A young man en route to morning prayers insisted he heard stones contracting, though no one else did. Yet, nearly all shared the same instinctive reaction. Their gaze lifted toward the crest, as if anticipating an imminent appearance. Jerusalem did not awaken in fear. It awoke in recognition, like a city recalling something long forgotten, something ancient, something foretold. For centuries, the Mount of Olives had been silent, its prophecy in abeyance. But that morning, at 4:14, the silence fractured. Not enough to cleave the ridge yet, but enough to utter the initial warning. The mountain is shifting, And Jerusalem is no longer merely observing prophecy, it is experiencing it beneath its own ground. The first sign had arrived, and the city, though oblivious, had already begun its response. In the ensuing days, scientists, hikers, and silent observers all reported the same phenomenon. The mountain continued to move. Not in violent convulsions or ruptures, but in gradual, deliberate increments, as if the earth had begun tracing a line it had patiently awaited millennia to draw. What initially appeared as a cluster of superficial cracks evolved with each sunrise into a pattern too intentional to dismiss. Satellite imagery captured over a 14-day period revealed a subtle widening along the eastern ridge of the Mount of Olives. Engineers studying these images anticipated randomness, irregular curves, chaotic fissures, the typical hallmarks of geological stress. Instead, they discovered alignment. The fractures extended in a clean east-to-west trajectory, mirroring the precise line Zechariah described in his ancient prophecy. The data implied something disquieting. The mountain was unfolding along a predetermined path. Hikers who had traversed these trails months prior returned to discover the terrain altered beneath their feet. What were once hairline cracks now deepened sufficiently to engulf stones. Some sections had doubled in width in under 3 weeks. One group described the sensation of shifting gravel beneath the surface, a soft grinding, like distant footsteps echoing beneath the soil. They ceased walking, not out of fear, but from an undeniable sense that the mountain was adjusting itself, centimetre by centimetre, hour by hour. Instruments positioned along the ridge detected a constant, almost imperceptible vibration, not sharp enough to classify as seismic, yet persistent enough to indicate motion. The readings suggested pressure migrating through the rock in a steady, almost rhythmic pulse, almost alive. For geologists, it was an enigma. For those familiar with prophecy, it was an affirmation. Concurrently, the enigmatic water flowing from the Temple Mount continued its eastward journey, embracing the very fault line forming beneath the mountain. It carved a narrow channel down toward the Kidron Valley, moving with an intelligence that defied natural explanation. Water adheres to gravity, not prophecy. Yet, this water behaved as if responding to an ancient summons, its path precisely aligned with the developing fracture, as if guiding it, illuminating it, completing it. Experts studying the phenomenon employed technical terminology: stress redistribution, subsurface migration, incipient fault activity. But witnesses on the ridge, who felt the mountain breathe, used different words. The earth is preparing, the valley is forming, and in the quiet hours before dawn, when the light skims the stones and shadows settle into the widening seams, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Mount of Olives is no longer waiting. It has begun to divide. The foretold valley is manifesting itself, not as a metaphor, but in stone. Hours before the tremor rippled through the Mount of Olives, Jerusalem bore witness to an even more peculiar event, one that should have been impossible during that season. At the Temple Mount, where the stones customarily lie dry beneath the cool night air, water began to seep through the cracks. Initially thin, like tears forming along ancient eyelids. There was no rainfall, no ruptured pipes, no natural conditions to account for what witnesses observed firsthand. Rabbis who had prayed at the Western Wall for decades recoiled in disbelief, calling it the stones weeping. Pilgrims dropped to their knees, murmuring, "Living water, it's living water." For many, it was not the water's appearance that astonished them. It was its timing, for as the flow intensified, the ground beneath the Mount of Olives trembled at 4:14 a.m., as if the mountain and the temple were responding to the same unseen voice. And then came the recordings. Leaked footage captured at 3:58 a.m. showed the water shimmering under moonlight, yet its luminosity did not behave like reflected light. It pulsed, it breathed, it glowed with a faint, steady illumination, fading the moment the sun rose. Engineers reviewed the footage frame by frame and concluded the glow was not environmental, that is, not caused by any light source on Earth. The water continued to push outward, forming a narrow ribbon flowing eastward toward the Kidron Valley, precisely the direction Ezekiel 47 described over 2 millennia ago. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. A trickle evolving into a stream, following the same path the prophet mapped long before modern Jerusalem existed. By mid-morning, analysts arrived with instruments, expecting to find evidence of an underground reservoir or a ruptured pipeline. They found nothing. No leaks, no fractures, no shimmering minerals, nothing that should produce water, let alone glowing water. One investigator finally admitted, off record, that the water has no natural signature. It's as if it appeared from nowhere. But those who stood in the presence of that flow asserted the opposite. "It didn't appear from nowhere," a pilgrim whispered. "It appeared from prophecy." And if the mountain's trembling was the first sign, then this water, unbidden, unexplained, and impossibly alive, was the second. A sign not etched by human hands or geological processes, but by something far older, far greater. Do not leave. What comes next will astound you even more than the water and the tremor. Long before the sun illuminated the hills of Jerusalem, another sign emerged, one that rendered even the most skeptical observers speechless. A low hum drifted across the Mount of Olives. It did not echo like machinery. It did not rumble like thunder. Witnesses described it as a buried trumpet, a sound ascending from beneath the ground rather than the sky, ancient and resonant, as if the earth were recalling something it had forgotten. A security guard, stationed near the eastern overlook, stated that the vibration struck his ribs with the force of a heartbeat not his own. He attempted to speak into his radio, but no sound escaped his throat. Others near him reported the same paralysis, not fear, but an overwhelming sense of presence, as though the very air had thickened around them. Then came the visions. Several worshippers sleeping in hostels at the base of the mountain awoke moments before the tremor, each with the identical dream. A figure in white stood atop the ridge, his feet firmly planted, the ground beneath subtly parting with a line of luminosity. Though these individuals were entirely unacquainted and spoke different tongues, their descriptions converged with startling accuracy. The man's presence, his posture, the emanating glow, and the valley that seemed to unfurl at his feet. On the mountain itself, other observers witnessed an even more tangible marvel. Tiny fissures appearing in the rock began to emit a soft, pulsating glow, devoid of heat, but instead rhythmically throbbing like a steady, vibrant heartbeat. This luminescence persisted for mere seconds, yet those who observed it vehemently denied it was a mere reflection. It appeared to emanate from within the stone, as if light lay captive beneath its surface, striving for release. No official video was released. Authorities attributed its absence to camera malfunctions. However, clandestine clips circulated quietly, showing 2.8 seconds of light burgeoning through the cracks before the camera abruptly transitioned to static, as if overwhelmed. For many, the collective sound, the light, and the shared visions proved more disconcerting than the tremor itself. Earthquakes are quantifiable. Water can be analyzed. Rocks can fracture. But a single sound heard across an entire mountain, a shared dream among strangers, and light emanating from stone are phenomena that elude scientific classification. Jerusalem remains suspended between disbelief and wonder, as the most inexplicable manifestation emerged not from stone, water, or sound, but from human bodies. 3 instantaneous healings were documented, each impossible, each coinciding precisely with the subterranean shift beneath the Mount of Olives. The first involved a woman who had suffered blindness for 12 years, having resigned herself to a life in darkness. Yet, as the tremor coursed through the hillside, she perceived a sudden pressure behind her eyes, a warmth radiating outward, as if an unseen force had delicately reached into her skull and reactivated a long-dormant switch. Light inundated her vision, sharpening forms and revealing colors. As she fully opened her eyes, the world materialized before her. Later, examining physicians could only reiterate, there is no medical explanation. The second healing delved even deeper into the realm of human impossibility. A man, paralyzed from the waist down for 7 years, his muscles atrophied and nerves unresponsive, felt the ground vibrate beneath him. The instant the tremor contacted his feet, sensation surged upward through his legs like an escalating current. He twitched one toe, then another. Moments later he stood. Witnesses described him walking slowly at first, then quickening his pace until he was running across the courtyard, shouting through tears. His medical team reviewed his scans,